the students who can't necessarily come in, we are recording. Brilliant. Okay, so let me just change that so I can't see the words I'm saying as they come out. Okay, so the way that we're going to look at comparing the text today is we're going to have a look at one of the exam papers on the exam board website, because it's the best place to find all of the information about what to expect on the exams. So we're going to have a look at, here we go. Now, this is one of the exam papers that we have been through on the exam walkthrough. So you may be familiar with some of the texts already. However, depending how much time we have, we might have a look at more than one, just so we can get some practice. So in the reading exams, the first section, we are given a text and some questions. The second section, we are given a text and some questions. The third, we're on repeat now, we are given a text and some questions. And then the final section, I think is only, it's only 2 questions long, but they are slightly higher in marks. So we do need to spend a little bit more time when we're answering these questions. Now, again, because it's the reading paper, the whole thing is only out of, oh gosh, was this one 30 marks? Yeah, and we only need 16 in order to pass. However, it's always good to make sure that we get those marks where we can. So this particular question is worth 3 marks. And what it's asking us to do is to compare the views of one person in document 3 with the views in document 2, giving examples. And this is one of the key words because it needs to, it's a reminder that we need to be adding quotes into our answer. So what I'm going to do is, for those of you that haven't seen this particular exam before, I will read the 2 documents, or the 2 parts of the documents. Then I will give you what I consider to be a 3-mark exemplar answer. And then we'll have a look at another one of the exam papers and just see, see if this question comes up. It will come up. And have a look at some of the other types of documents that we're expected to read. So I've highlighted the word views, the views of somebody called Zainab, and the views. So it's the thoughts and opinions of the people who have written these articles. So let's start right at the beginning. Again, some of you may already be familiar with these documents. Don't worry, it's just to confirm what we already know. So this is a website. We have the tabs at the top, where if it was a real website, it would take us to other bits of information. And it says, be an Anston Town Ambassador. Our wonderful Anston, okay, this is starting with some very positive terminology. Our wonderful Anston ambassadors provide visitors to Anston with the very best of welcomes. Okay, more positivity. They also supply their vital local knowledge so that visitors make the most of everything our spectacular town, more positivity, has to offer. Do you feel passionate about the UK's happiest town? Would you like to help spread the word and tell people about our marvellous shops, restaurants and other attractions? This could be a really rewarding experience, so why don't you join us? You don't need to be an expert on Anston's history, on theatre or museums, as we can teach you all the know-how. What you need is genuine enthusiasm for Anston and to be friendly and welcoming. Okay, so it's an advert for a volunteer job, a volunteer position, to be an ambassador for the local council. Right, okay. So far, just from reading that first paragraph, there is lots of positivity. So I've just highlighted a couple of those as we were going through. So already I'm thinking their views are very positive. Right. So I'm just going to have a look at document 3. And it says we need to focus on the person called Zainab. Okay, so this is a forum. So I think earlier in the week we looked at purpose, audience and form. So for anybody that wasn't sure what a forum is, or a message board they sometimes call it, this is a perfect example. So this is where people are all coming together to talk about the same subject and express their thoughts and opinions. In this case, it's called the Anston Forum or Town Centre. Town Centre Talk for Anston. So it's like Facebook groups where you get on with your local community and all talk about, well, where I live, it's holes in the road, the bin collection, dogs pooing on the street, and any crime, which round here, no crime, it's nice. So we have contributions. The first one is from a person called Aisha or Aisha. The second one is Zainab. The third is Will. Then we have Doreen, and then Will talks again. Okay, so Zainab only talks about one comment. So let's have a look. She says, I don't know why you think the town ambassadors are a good idea, Aisha. What are they for? They're kitted out in expensive all-weather gear, but I've never seen them doing anything. Oof, okay, a little bit negative. They always seem to be at a loose end. Do they catch shoplifters? Pick up litter? If they're there to help visitors, wouldn't a few signposts be cheaper? As I've just been lumbered with another hefty increase on my council tax bill, I'd like to know why town ambassadors are considered so essential to the running of Anston. And then even at the end, they've got a little unhappy face emoji. So even though it's not words, it backs up the opinion that this one is potentially negative. Okay, compare the views of Zainab with the views expressed in document 2, giving examples from each. We should consider textual features and identify the purpose of each text. Right. Exemplar answer time. I'm going to start with document 2. That's the first one we read, and it was the one that was being incredibly positive. So in document 2, the writer makes positive statements about the town of Anston and the role of ambassadors. For example, and all quotes, everything taken from the text must always start with quotation marks at the beginning and quotation marks at the end so that we can see, or the examiner can see, exactly which words you've taken from there. So, for example, I'm going to say this first little bit, our wonderful Anston ambassadors. So I've chosen that bit because right from the very start, it's positive, open, friendly, welcoming. So in document 2, the writer makes positive statements about the town of Anston and the role of ambassadors. For example, blah, 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 blah. Then we jump straight to document 3. In document 3, Zainab, in fact, I'm going to just refer to those. I'm going to use the words from the question because that always helps. Zainab's views are clearly a lot more negative, as she says. In fact, I'm not going to say as she says, as she uses. Now, I'm going to put this out there since it's only a relatively small class. We've only got 3 of you on today. Are any of you able to spot any language features in there? I mean, feel free if you can see any, just write them in chat, or you can speak if you prefer. Can you see? Aha, nice one, Agnes. Yes, we have rhetorical questions. So this is when the writer is asking a question, but really they're making a statement. For example, she says, do they catch shoplifters? What we can infer from that is that she does not think that they will stop shoplifters. She says, do they pick up litter? She's saying, I do not think that they pick up litter. So I'm going to say she uses rhetorical questions to show her. In this case, I think she's quite disapproving of the roles. So in document 3, Zainab's views are clearly a lot more negative as she uses rhetorical questions to show her disapproval. And again, we just copy and paste. And I'm going to use 2 of those rhetorical questions. Do they catch shoplifters? Pick up litter. And again, so we just go in and paste it. So we've compared the views of both people, or both writers. We've given some examples, but the question asks for one more thing. We need to identify textual features. Well, do you know what? We've mentioned rhetorical questions. That is a textual feature. You could also use the fact that the Zainab uses a little emoji just to express her dissatisfaction or her disapproval. We could also use the fact that she uses quite informal or slang terms. So rather than saying they are dressed in expensive all-weather gear, she uses the phrase kitted out, which is, again, it's very informal to say somebody is kitted out. So you could use any of those examples. In the first text, or in this case, document 2, we haven't actually mentioned those. So let's go back and see if, we have a rhetorical question. So in this case, the writer is saying, do you feel passionate about the UK's happiest town? Brilliant. So what that's trying to make you do is to make you think, do I feel passionate? Yes, I do feel passionate about the UK's happiest town. So I would just put a small note on here. So the writer makes positive statements about the town of Anston and the role of ambassadors. For example, our wonderful Anston ambassadors. They also use rhetorical questions to make the reader think. I'm afraid it's almost like a textbook answer. Whenever you're asked why does a writer use rhetorical questions, it's usually to put a question into the reader's head and make them think, what would my answer to that question be? So that is a 3-mark question. And if we have a quick look at the mark scheme, let's see exactly what it requires for us to do. Excuse me, I know it's question, I think it was 15. Here we go. Right. We're going to ignore this bit where it just says about to achieve 1 mark. We're going to ignore this bit about achieving 2 marks. We're going to focus on this where it says what we need to do to achieve 3 marks. It says we need clear and explicit comparison of the views expressed by Zainab and the views expressed in document 2, with examples from both sources. And that gives an example of what they would sort of recommend. For example, Zainab seems to think the town ambassadors are a waste of money and she doesn't understand what they actually do. Okay, you know what? We've said she's disapproving and she doesn't agree with them. She thinks they're a waste of money. While in document 2, explains the role of the ambassador, encouraging people to apply. There is clear comparison of how views are conveyed in both documents. For example, and we discussed this, so we said Zainab uses very informal language, emojis and slang, whereas document 2 is a lot more formal in tone and structure. Okay, so again, with this, we don't have to always use the examples that are given in the mark scheme, but I am confident that the answer that we'd written covers all 3 of those points. So we have the views expressed and how, using rhetorical questions in the first document. We have the views expressed in the second document and how they've done that. And then we have the quotes to back everything up. That's essentially how you achieve those 3 marks for this question. Now, again, the question's worth 3 marks. We will always strive to achieve 3 marks and the highest possible in all of these questions. However, even if you're only able, like if you're given particularly complex documents, I mean, they are fairly standard across the board. But if you struggled with this question and you were only able to do a limited comparison, you would still get 1 mark. If you were able to give, in fact, at least 1 view expressed by them, there we go. So if you just wrote that in the first document, they're very positive, and in the second document, she's very negative, that would achieve you 1 mark. If you went into slightly more detail and you added quotes for those, you would get 2 marks. And if you added the language features or the textual features as well, that's where we get 3 marks. So it's all on a sort of sliding scale. If you do it a little bit, you get 1 mark. If you do a little bit more, you get 2 marks. And if you do all 3 of those things, you get 3 marks. Okay. We're going to have a look at another exam paper, do the same thing again with a different piece. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think we've just done number 3, I think. Let me just check. Yes. Okay. So would one of you like to pick a number, either 1, 2, 4, or 5?
5.
Number 5. Okie dokie. Sorry, that was the first one I heard. Thank you. So exam paper 5, let's have a look at this one. It'll be in the same section, so towards the end. And it will be, here we go. So this one. And look, it's almost an identical question. Compare the views of Ken in document 3 with the views expressed in document 1, giving examples from each text. In your answer, you should also consider how language is used. This is almost identical to the question that we've done. So that's one of the points of these sort of little recorded sessions, these live lessons. If you know that this question is going to appear on all of these past papers, then you also know that when you sit your real exam, which for some of us is quite soon, then the chances of this particular question coming up is quite high. So let's have a go at it. First things first, we're going to read the documents. Okay, so again, you may have seen this paper in some of the previous classes. This one is about food waste. So it's an online article. Already I'm sort of analysing it and picking out some of these sort of layout features as we go. So I can see it's a website, it's an article, and it was written by a guy called Richard. Okay. Surprisingly, Britain produces enough surplus food or food waste to make 450,000 meals each year. The majority of this excess food is close to its best before date and so cannot be sold. However, one organisation in Showford is successfully fighting against food waste. Showford Food Network started in 2016 when its founder, Jenny Green, realised the massive scale of problem in her area. My local supermarket was throwing away mountains of unwanted food. Determined that this didn't go into landfill, she says, I got into my car one evening, went to the supermarket, picked up a ridiculous amount, and then just stored it all in my garage. The next morning, she contacted a local homeless charity to see if they wanted it. And within 10 minutes, the organiser was on my doorstep. They couldn't have been more grateful. By lunchtime, the food had been turned into delicious meals for their day centre. 5 years later, and with a small army of helpers involved, the Homeless Day Centre is just one organisation receiving surplus food. Indeed, the Food Network has grown massively in the last 18 months, mainly thanks to its helpers. It now shares food among many community groups, including old people's homes, youth centres, nurseries, and the local food bank. But Jenny is quick to point out that only some of the Food Network's achievements are because of her work. The reasons for surplus food, and then we're given a list. The wider impact of Showford Food Network. Then we have some statistics. Okay, let's just read this little bit at the bottom. Get involved. Aha, this is telling us the purpose of the text. And look, again, we have these rhetorical questions. It says, inspired to help, then you, this is direct address, direct, it's talking to you, the reader, then you could join all of those making a difference and become part of the Showford Food Network yourself. The organisation is always looking for more drivers or people to help in the warehouse sorting all the food. But if you're a business, why not donate your surplus food? For more on what the Food Network does, to volunteer or donate, visit website address. Okay, so in this case, it sounds like it's trying to persuade you to become a volunteer for this organisation, or it's trying to persuade you to find more information about it, or it's trying to persuade you, if you're a business, to donate any surplus food. So overall, it's trying to persuade us to get involved, as well as giving us information about it. And I think overall, it's quite positive about it. It uses a lot of exaggeration, like at one point it mentioned a mountain. Here we go, a mountain of unwanted food. So it's using something called hyperbole or over exaggeration. They also talk about the fact they have so many people, a small army of helpers. So they're using exaggeration a couple of times in here to express the volume, the size of the problem, and the size of the people, you know, the number of people that are willing to help. Right. So again, I think that first document is quite positive. Then it says we're just looking at the views of Ken in document 3. So again, look, this is a forum. So it's like Reddit or those Facebook community groups. So we've got a contribution from Mina, Ken, Abdul and Sarah. So we look at this one from Ken. That's who we're focusing on. The Food Network supplies Showford Food Bank. I was out of work for 4 months last year and was lucky enough to get food from there every week. It meant that me and the kids could still get fresh fruit and veg. I can't begin to explain how lucky we felt. The Food Network is absolutely brilliant. Okay, so he's very positive about the food bank as well. So he calls it brilliant. And then he also expresses twice the fact that he feels lucky. He feels lucky because he benefited from the food bank when he was unemployed. Okay, so let's have a look at writing our answer. So compare the views of Ken in document 3. In document 3, Ken uses, and now we said he uses the word lucky, so he uses repetition to show his positive feelings towards, and it's the name of it, so capital letters, the Food Network. For example, he states he felt, and we could copy and paste, but in this case, I'm only using just a single word. So he states he felt lucky that he was able to get help from them. Okay, so we've stated Ken's views, and we've also stated his the language feature, the repetition, and we've put the quote in for him already. So that is halfway, but that's everything this question is asking us. The views, an example, and how the language has been used. So let's look at the second one. In document 1, now we don't know, in fact, do we know the writer's name? We do, Richard Brown. You could say the writer, or you could say Richard Brown. And just to refresh my memory, there we go. So the last thing I said was that they use lots of over-exaggeration or hyperbole in order to express their positivity towards this. So in document 1, the writer, or Richard Brown, uses, and you can either go with a very technical term, but you wouldn't be marked down if you just put exaggeration. Now, I do believe I did a very quick video on these language features that I have uploaded onto Atom. So if you're totally unsure of what hyperbole is, for starters, you could just say exaggeration and that would be totally fine. But if you particularly love learning English and you want to use the best possible terms, hyperbole is more precise. So in document 1, the writer, Richard Brown, uses hyperbole or exaggeration and he uses it to emphasize the scale of the problem of food waste and how he feels about it, which in this case is quite negatively. And again, we put our little quotation marks in the beginning and put them at the end. And if we find our quote, he talks about, let's just highlight this little bit. Oh, it's not having it today. Here we go. So again, we just copy, paste it onto our answers. Oh, silly me. And then just to make it extra clear, so I've said that this shows how he feels about the problem. I'm just going to make it extra clear for this one. So in document 1, the writer uses exaggeration to emphasize the scale of the problem of food waste and how he feels about throwing away mountains of unwanted food. He hates the idea of food waste and encourages the reader to become involved in the food network. So there we go. We have done exactly the same thing with 2 different exam past papers where we have read the 2 pieces and then we have completed this comparison question. So, I mean, technically you could answer this question in 2 sentences if you included and if you got the writing perfect. However, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all if you use things like the perfect terminology. This is not degree level English work. You are just making sure that you are able to express yourself clearly. So if you want to use words like exaggeration instead of hyperbole, not a problem in the slightest. As long as you cover those 3 things for both documents, you will attain the highest marks. So you say how they both feel about the subject they're talking about, give quotes from both documents, and then say how the language is used. So we've said repetition in one and exaggeration in the other. And that would score you 3 marks. That's it for the comparison questions. Now, you've seen from here, we have multiple examples, and I will just go into the chat and put this link in here in case you want to have a look at them. Although I know I say this every single time I show you anything off this website, do not complete your answer, press next, and then finish test, because what it will do, it will disappear into the ether. It will not be marked by anybody. Nobody will see it. So if you want to try one of these questions, then all you would need to do is highlight what you write and then copy it into an email, send it to me, and tell me which of these exam papers you've looked at. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Now, the other thing is, these are all on the level 2 papers. On the level 1, let me just see if I can find, they're not much different. You're just asked to look at shorter documents, or your answers may be shorter. So on a level 1 paper, oh look, compare the information, ideas and opinions given in document 1 about the restaurant Boxby with what is said in document 2. So the first 2 that we've looked at said, tell us about the ideas or the views given, use quotes, and tell us about the language. At level 1, it asks us just to do less of that. So it asks us to compare the information, ideas, and opinions, but it doesn't ask us, for this particular one at level 1, it doesn't ask us to focus too much on the language. It only asks us to focus on the information, ideas, and opinions. So with all of these, I know yesterday we were asked questions about the difference between level 1 and level 2. So we've spent all that time, we've looked at 2 level 2 comparison questions, and this is how it compares to a level 1. So again, you get the same kind of documents. In this case, we have a newspaper, and then we have a website, but the question is asking you to do a lot less at level 1, which is great. You'll also be able to see that at level 1, the exam as a whole is a lot shorter. So at level 2, there are 4 sections, and you read one document, answer questions, read document 2, answer questions, document 3, answer questions, and then you're asked to look at multiples and do the comparisons. At level 1, if you can see this bar on the left-hand side, there are only 3 sections. That means you read a document, you answer the questions, you read a document, you answer the questions, and then you do these comparison questions. So you're required to do a lot less. I always try to give you, because some of you are studying level 1, some of you are studying level 2, I know that if I aim things at level 2, it will be above and beyond what is needed for level 1. So it's just ensuring, it also means that if you're wanting to progress onto level 2, you can see the sort of the difference between them and how much harder you have to work to achieve that level 2 qualification. So we have done a level 2 comparison question. We've done another level 2 comparison question. Would you like, as a group, another example? Or does anybody have any problems, questions? I'll open it up to the floor. Kate, I will respond to you in a little bit, just because this is being recorded for everybody. If anybody has any questions just about these comparisons, please ask away.
I'm sorry, good morning. Yes, I have questions about comparisons.
Yeah.
Usually I understand they use some synonyms
Mm-hmm.
and text when you're reading, and sometimes it's a little bit hard to give the answer, because it should be this correct answer and it's going to be different answer, and I was confusing more. It's like
the questions with the synonyms, let me just find one, because you are allowed to use a dictionary. So if you have a paper dictionary, and again, let me just show you an example of one of these. So we'll just go into the exam paper. The question will say, let me find perfect example. What do those mean? Fact and opinion. I want to find one that is very, very specifically. Here we go. So this is one of the questions about synonyms. So you are allowed to have a paper dictionary open with you in the exam. You can't in the writing exam, but this question comes up on both the level 1 and the level 2 reading exams. So in this case, it says, what does the word buff mean as used in the glass cleaner section? Now, this particular one, this piece is telling us all about how to create and use environmentally friendly cleaning products. Now, even if you don't have a dictionary, you can still use what we call context clues to try to find another word. So if we look at this, it says, we've found the word buff. This is what it wants us to find an alternative for. So it says, combine the ingredients in a spray bottle and shake. Spray onto a soft cloth and wipe onto the wooden surfaces in the direction of the grain. For detailed areas, work it in with a soft bristle brush. Buff with a soft dry cloth until the surface is shiny. So, I mean, I'm literally, you can see I'm sort of acting it out so that I remember. So spray, wipe, all this. Now, when it says buff with a soft dry cloth, I would like to think that as adults, we can read this, we understand it. So it says shake, spray, wipe, and then get a clean cloth. What do you call it when you put when you make something shiny just with a clean cloth? I would use the word polish for that one. Now, if I looked up literally synonyms for buff, now you can't use the internet, you can't just use Google for during your exams, but in this case it says that's a buffer. No, we don't want buffer, we just want buff. Buff. That's better. Oh look, the first thing that comes up, to polish. That's it. That's all it's asking you to. So even if you don't have a dictionary, you can still use your life experience, your knowledge of the world and everything in it to see if you can find an alternative word. It doesn't have to be 100% precise. And in the exam mark scheme, it will often use the phrase alternative wordings can be accepted. So if that one was question 9, their answers, they would say you could either use polish or shine for this particular one, but again, they will accept anything else similar. So even though they give us 2 examples of synonyms, they would accept anything else that means the same thing. It doesn't have to be a higher register or a more exciting word or a more precise word. Anything that means roughly the same thing would still be accepted for that question. So try not to get too hung up. And again, look how many marks it's worth. It's only worth 1 mark on the whole exam paper. So don't panic if you struggle with the synonyms. Again, this exam paper, you're only expected to get 16 out of 30 marks. And this is only worth 1 mark. I always try to focus more on these higher mark questions, the 2, 3, 4, 5, and just being confident in all of the other ones where it just asks you to find information. If you particularly struggle with synonyms, don't panic. It may not be the difference between passing and failing the exam. Is there a word count for comparing text? No. No, not at all. You could do it as short as 2 very well crafted sentences, but other than that, no. If you wanted to write 1 sentence that talked about the views of the first piece, and then 1 sentence that talked about the language features used, and then 1 sentence with a quote, and then do the same for the second, doesn't matter. As long as you include those 3 things, the views of the writer, the quote, and then any language or textual features used. If you do that for both texts, you've got it. It doesn't matter. I would say because it's only worth 3 marks, don't write page after page after page, just because the exams are quite tight on time. If you've got an hour to do that exam, it's worth 30 marks. That means so each mark, you get a maximum of 2 minutes to work on it. So rather than constraining yourself with time, with words, constrain yourself with time instead. I would say, don't worry about the words, stick to time, 6 minutes to answer that question. 6 minutes for a 3 mark question. So just limit yourself on time, not on the volume you write it. Any other questions? Please ask away. And if I'm talking about something and something springs into your head, feel free, put it in the chat. I will address it as and when I come to them.